Chapter 111.
Everything felt like it was going much too fast, like it was spinning out of control. Maybe that was right. The case was out of our control. The wolf was running it. I got a phone call at home 2 nights later. It was 3:15 in the morning.
This had better be good.
It isn't. All hell's broken loose, Alex. It's a war. The caller was Tony Woods, and he sounded groggy. I massaged my forehead as I spoke. What war? Tell me what happened. We got word from Texas a few minutes ago. Lawrence Lipton is dead. Murdered. They got to him in his cell. I was starting to wake up in a hurry. How? He was in our custody, wasn't he? 2 agents were killed with Lipton. He predicted it, didn't he? I nodded. Then I said, yeah. Alex, they got to the Lipton family, too. They're all dead. HRT is on the way to your house, also the directors, even Mahoney's. Anybody who worked on the case is considered vulnerable and at risk. That got me up out of bed. I took my Glock out of the locked cabinet beside my bed. I'll be waiting for HRT, I told Woods. Then I hurried downstairs with my gun in hand. Was the wolf already here? I wondered. The war came to our house a few minutes later, and even though it was HRT, it couldn't have been much scarier. Nana Mama was up, and she greeted the heavily armed FBI agents with angry looks, but also offers of coffee. Then she and I went to wake the children as gently as we could. This isn't right, Alex. Not in our home, Nana Mama whispered as we went upstairs to get Janny and Damon. The line has to be drawn somewhere, doesn't it? This is bad. I know it is. It's gotten out of control, everything has. The world is that way now. So what are you going to do about it? What are you planning to do? Right now, wake the kids. Hug them, kiss them, get them out of this house for a while. Are you listening to yourself? Nana asked as we arrived at the doorway to Damon's bedroom. He was already sitting up in bed. Dad, he said. Ned Mahoney came up behind me. Alex, can I have a second? What was he doing here? What else had happened? I'll wake them, get them dressed, Nana said. Talk to your friend. I stayed behind with Mahoney. What is it, Ned? Can't it wait for a couple of minutes? Jesus. The bastards hit Burns's house. Everybody's all right. We got there in time. I stared into Mahoney's eyes. Your family? They're out of the house. They're safe for now. We've got to find him and burn him. I nodded. Let me get my kids up. 20 minutes later, my family was escorted outside to a waiting van. They climbed inside like frightened refugees in a war zone. That's what the world was becoming, wasn't it? Every city and town was a potential battlefield. No place was safe. Just before I climbed into the van, I spotted a photographer posted across the street from our house on 5th Street. It looked like he was photographing the evacuation of our house. Why was that? I'm not sure how I knew who he was, but somehow I did. He's not from any newspaper, I thought. I felt myself filling with rage and disgust. He works for Christine's lawyers.
Chapter 112.
Chaos. The next day, and for 2 days after that, I found myself in Huntsville, Texas, the site of the federal prison where Lawrence Lipton had been murdered while he was in the custody of the Federal Bureau. No one there had any explanation for how Lipton and 2 agents had been killed. It had happened during the night, in his cell. Actually, the small suite where he was kept under guard. None of the video cameras had a record of visitors. None of the interviews or interrogations had turned up a suspect. Lipton had had most of the bones in his body broken. Zemushit, the Red Mafia trademark. The same method had been used on an Italian mafia figure named Agostino Palumbo this past summer. According to stories, Palumbo's killer had been a Russian mobster, possibly the Wolf. The murder had taken place at the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. The following morning, I arrived in Colorado. I was there to visit a killer named Kyle Craig, who had once been an FBI agent and also a friend of mine. Kyle was responsible for dozens of murders. He was one of the worst psychopathic killers in history. I had captured him. My friend. We met in an interview room on death row in the isolation unit. Kyle looked surprisingly fit. When I'd last seen him, he had been gaunt and very pale, with deep dark hollows under his eyes. He appeared to have put on at least 30 pounds, all of it muscle. I wondered why. What had given Kyle hope? Whatever it was scared me a little.
"All roads lead to Florence?"
He quipped, and grinned as I entered the interview room.
"Some associates of yours from the Bureau were here just yesterday, or was it the day before? You know, the last time we met, Alex, you said you didn't care what I think. That hurt."
I corrected him, which I knew would annoy Kyle. Not exactly what I said. You accused me of being condescending and told me that you didn't like it. I said, "Who cares what you like anymore?" I do care about what you think. That's why I'm here. Kyle laughed again, and the braying sound he made, the baring of his teeth, chilled me.
You always were my favorite.
You were expecting me?
Hard to say. Not really. Maybe at some time in the future.
You look like you have big plans. You're all buffed.
What plans could I possibly have?
The usual. Grand delusions, homicidal fantasies, rape, the slaughter of innocents.
I do hate it when you play psychologist, Alex. You didn't make it in that world for a good reason.
I shrugged. I know that, Kyle. None of my patients in Southeast had money to pay me. I needed to start a practice in Georgetown. Maybe I will someday. He laughed again.
Talk about delusions. So why are you here? No, I'll tell you why. There's been a terrible miscarriage of justice, and I'm being released. You're the messenger of glad tidings.
The only miscarriage is that you haven't been executed, Kyle. Kyle's eyes sparkled. I was one of his favorites.
All right. Now that you've charmed me, what is it that you want?
You know what I want, Kyle, I said. You know exactly why I'm here. He clapped his hands loudly.
Zalochit! The Mad Russian!
For the next half an hour, I told Kyle everything I knew about the Wolf. Well, nearly everything. Then I gave him the kicker. He met with you on the night he came here to kill little Gus Palumbo. Did you set up the kill for him? Somebody did. Kyle leaned back and seemed to be considering his options, but I knew he'd already decided what he meant to do. He was always a step or two ahead. Finally, he leaned forward and beckoned me closer. I wasn't afraid of Kyle, at least not physically, not even with his extra pounds of muscle. I almost hoped he'd make a move.
I do this out of love and respect for you. I did meet with a Russian last summer. Ruthless chap, no conscience. I liked him. We played chess. I know who he is, my friend. I might be able to help you.
Chapter 113.
It took me another day at Florence, but I finally negotiated a name out of Kyle. Now, could we believe him? The name was checked and rechecked in Washington, and the Bureau was becoming confident that he had given us the Red Mafia leader. I had doubts, because it came from Kyle, but we had no other leads. Maybe Kyle was trying to blow me up or embarrass the Bureau. Or maybe he wanted to demonstrate how smart he was, how well connected, how superior to us all. The name, the person's position, made the arrest controversial and risky. If we went after this man and we were wrong, the embarrassment would stick to the Bureau. So we waited for nearly a week. We checked all our information again and did several interviews in the field. The suspect was put under surveillance. When we had completed the due diligence, I met with Ron Burns and the director of the CIA in Burns's office. Ron got to the point. "We believe he's the wolf, Alex. Craig is probably telling the truth." Thomas Weir from the CIA nodded my way. "We've been watching this suspect in New York for some time. We thought he'd been KGB back in Russia, but there wasn't conclusive evidence. We never suspected Red Mafia, never the wolf. Not this man. Not given his position with the Russian government." Weir's look was intense. "We increased the levels of audio surveillance to include the apartment where the suspect lives in Manhattan. He's making arrangements to go after Director Burns again." Burns looked at me. "He doesn't forgive and forget, Alex. Neither do I." "Is that it? We go to New York and arrest him?" Burns and Weir nodded solemnly. "This should be the end of it," said Burns. "Go and take down the wolf. Bring me his head."
Chapter 114.
This should be the end of it. From Director Burns's mouth to God's ear. The Century is a famous Art Deco apartment building on Central Park West, north of Columbus Circle in New York City. For decades, it has been a residence of choice for well-to-do actors, artists, and business people, but especially those who are humble enough to share space with working-class families who've passed down their apartments for decades. We arrived at the building around 4 in the morning. HRT immediately took over the 3 main entrances on Central Park, 62nd, and 63rd Streets. This was the largest bust I had been a part of, definitely the most complicated. The New York City Police, FBI, CIA, and Secret Service were all involved in the operation. We were about to take down an important Russian, the head of the trade delegation to New York. A businessman himself, supposedly above suspicion. The repercussions would be severe if we were wrong. But how could we be wrong? Not this time. I was at the Century along with my partner for the past week or so. Ned Mahoney was hard-working, honest, and tough in the clutch. The head of HRT had been to my house and even passed Nana's inspection, mostly because he'd grown up on the streets of D.C. Ned and I and a dozen others were climbing the stairs to 2 penthouse floors, since the suspect's apartment was on 21 and 22. He was powerful and wealthy. He had a good reputation with Wall Street and the banks. So was he the wolf? If so, why hadn't his name ever come up before? Because the wolf was so good? So careful? "Be glad when this is over with," Mahoney said, without a huff or puff as he mounted the stairs. "How did it get out of hand like this?" I asked. "There are too many people here." "Always too much politics. Better get used to it. World we live in. Too many suits, not enough workers." We finally reached 21. Ned and I and 4 other agents stopped there. The rest of the team continued to 22. We waited for them to get into position. This was it. I hoped this was it. Was the real wolf on one of these 2 floors? I heard an urgent voice in my earpiece. "Suspect coming out of a window. Man in his underwear jumped from the tower." Jesus Christ, he's down on the landing between the towers. He's on the roof, running. Mahoney and I understood what had happened. We rushed down to the 20th floor. The Century had 2 towers that rose up from 20. A large expansive roof connected them. We burst out onto the roof and immediately saw a barefoot man in his underwear. He was burly, balding, bearded. He turned and fired at us with a pistol. The wolf? Balding? Burly? Could this be him? He hit Mahoney. He hit me. We went down hard. Chest shots. Hurt like hell. Took my breath away. Fortunately, we were wearing Kevlar vests. The man in his underwear wasn't. Mahoney's return fire took out a kneecap. My first shot struck his thick stomach. He went down, spurting blood and howling. We ran to the side of Andre.